Hello there, and welcome to yet another of Andre's Artist Profiles. Now, today, this is not going to be in tribute to this particular musician's birthday, but I learned right just now, actually, that yesterday, this artist, George Duke, passed away at the age of 67. And I realized that his wife and paramour, creatively as well, Corinne, passed away a year ago. My own father, who I just talked to, suggested that George Duke might have died of a broken heart. Maybe it was a heart condition, I don't know, but whatever. George Duke is gone, and this video is dedicated to his son, Rashid. Uh, Words probably can't express how you're feeling today, but anyway, on a somewhat happier note, I actually have more George Duke probably than I have any other artist. Well over 20 albums, and I'm going to show you all of them today. But this first one is one that I don't think at present you can find on CD, and it's called Save the Country. I love the twin George Duke heads coming out of the mushroom cloud, and that mushroom cloud reminds me today is the 68th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. My heart goes out to all of the innocent victims of that. Anyway, I'm not getting into that today. This is about George Duke, but this album came out in 1970. It was recorded for the Saba label. There's the back of that album. Jay Graydon, Ernie Watts, a lot of people who, became known quite a bit later are on this album. There's horns on it. He hadn't even joined Frank Zappa yet. This is not an original issue. This is on the Pacific Jazz label. But that's my vinyl for George Duke, Save the Country. And now I'm going to go to my Mammoth collection. Let me see if I can bring them over here. Sorry about all that, me being in the way. Of George Duke CDs. As you can see, it's a truly mammoth collection and a little bit tipsy here. So I'm trying to stack a lot of things on top of each other. But I'm going to try to get through this as fast as possible because I got a lot of his stuff, more than can possibly fit in one video. This is the treasure trove of my collection. It's been in another of my videos, actually. George Duke, My Soul, the complete MPS fusion albums. And I can actually explain to you in the liner notes. Here we go. This is the albums it contains, the original covers. The Inner Source from 1971. Faces in Reflection and Feel from 1974. I Love the Blues, She Heard My Cry, and The Aura Will Prevail from 1975. And Liberated Fantasies from 1976. All of his recordings on MPS on 3 CDs. Actually, yeah, 3 CDs. This is a very special album. George Duke with Billy Cobham live on tour in Europe on the Wounded Bird label. That's one of their earliest. There's the liner notes. He was still very much a part of Frank Zappa's band at that time. I love the cover artwork. And there's a song on here called Space Lady, which is a great mixture of Sun Ra and P-Funk. I love that song. And Do What You Wanna is a really funky number too. It also has Frankenstein Goes to the Disco. George Duke's just an amazing musician, full of liveliness and ability. He just got the whole package. He had the whole package, and I think he's very, very under-heralded myself. Okay, now what happened was when he left MPS, he recorded a solo keyboard album called The Dream, but he released it again in 1982 called the 1976 solo keyboard album. Chester Thompson from Genesis and Santana helped him play drums on this, and he added some synthesizers later, but mostly as an acoustic piano record. I love the orange label on this album. There's George Duke from 1982. This was released on Epic, and then again on Wounded Bird in 2004. I love this album, one of my favorite of Duke's. Anyway. Now, this album, okay, this is not available individually like this anywhere but on George Duke's website, which is where I ordered this. From Me to You, from 1977, his Epic debut. There's George on his, looks like his Yamaha on the back. Now, this album, he tried to do a lot of things with orchestration, And there's some terrific songs on here, like Carry On, which Flora Purim did very dynamic and expansive funk, like Earth, Wind, and Fire, and a song called Excuse Me Miss, which, whew, if I had to have a theme song for a radio show, I'd use that instrumental. Fantastic album. George Duke thinks he tried to overdo it on this, but, get it through his website. You can get it commercially in other ways, but anyway. Reach for It. Now, this was George Duke's big commercial hit from 1977. Reach for It was, of course, the song that really broke him through as a commercially oriented artist. And interestingly enough, most of the rest of this album is very high-octane Latin fusion and funk. It's not really all that commercial a record. Not a bad album, though. Now this, okay, it's a little more commercial, but it's one of my favorites. Don't Let Go. Oh, man. We Give Our Love, Morning Sun, Dookie Stick, Moving On, this title song, Don't Let Go. Oh, funk up the wazoo. Fantastic George Duke record from 1978. I love this cover. 1979. Another one you can get only from his website. 1979. Follow the Rainbow. I Am For Real is a fantastic song. Party Down. There's even a song he dedicated to his wife, Corrine, on this album. Look at that. I love that artwork. Some of my favorite George Duke artwork. Festival was the radio show for a DJ, now musician I used to know, called Nigel Hall, who was and probably still is a George Duke fanatic, I would say. Anyway, another 1979, Master of the Game. I got this as an import when the Musicland or Sam Goody was closing down. There's George Duke and his clavitar, Remote Prophet 5, very early keytar. Look What You Find, I Want You For Myself, I Love You More. Daft Punk sampled that later. Great Brazilian jazz funk album, again. Now, George Duke went to Brazil, a place that he loved, to record this album in 1979. Brazilian Love Affair shows his fascination with the music of Milton Nascimento, and the title song is one of his greatest funky numbers, again from 1979. Open it up. It's on the Latin Jazz series, as you can see. George recorded most of this album in Brazil. Now, this is an original print. This has been reissued by Funky Town Grooves. George Duke, Dream On. That clavitar showed up a lot in his artwork. Oh, Shine On, I Will Always Be Your Friend, Framed, Someday Positive Energy, and Let Your Love Shine. Oh, just amazing. Very much early 80s pop funk kind of album, but I love it. Okay, I had to give this as an import, but I do not regret this. George Duke's Guardian of the Light. It's kind of a concept album with a bit of a Star Wars kind of theme to it. Shane and Silly Fighting are tremendously funky numbers. Remind me a little of something that Michael Jackson might do at that particular time, but lovely use of bass and piano on this album. And there's a song called Celebrate on here, which is really very much his interpretation of the synthesized boogie funk sound of the day. Because it's an import, it actually has the Epic label on it. There's the inside of that album. And the hit on here was called Reach Out, which was basically kind of a follow-up to Shine On from the previous album. But, he's gaining new ground. This album, I didn't know if I cared much for it at first. It came out in 1984. It's called Rendezvous. And this was his last for the Epic record label. But there are some amazing songs on here. Like Secret Rendezvous is a great boogie funk track. And so is Take It All. And Gotta Get Back to Love is a pretty good Quiet Storm kind of groove. But Better Ways is an awesome, screaming rocker. Nothing you'd expect from George Duke of this album. And he ends it with Eponema Lady, which is one of his great Latin songs, Now, this album, George Duke doesn't think much of it because he thought that he didn't sing the right kind of material for him. But I gotta say, in tribute to George Duke, he did a great job with this material. And I love this album more and more when I hear it. Thief in the Night is an amazing song. He's talking about see-through underwear, kind of another slick boogie funk kind of track, a little bit of a rock feel. And there's a song on here called We're Supposed to Have Fun that's got a terrific funky bass line. And a Stevie Wonder song called Remembering the 60s, which George Duke really does pretty well. It's on the Wounded Bird label. Actually, now one of my favorite albums. And Lala, I love that kind of Latin flavored pop jam at the end. Actually, becoming one of my favorite albums by him, if you really listen to it. Don't hate on the 80s. Now, this album, even George Duke agrees, this is pretty bold and daring from 1986. Wounded Bird have reissued this, but this is an original. George Duke. Now, Broken Glass sounds more like The Art of Noise. Synclaviers, sampling effects, fairlights, and all of that. Picture of George Duke at that time. He was always looking cool and happy, and that's the way I always remember him. Cool dude. Anyway, Island Girl is another great one on there. He even reunited with his old band for Stand With Your Man on this album. And African Violet ends it. One of his greater and bolder albums. Get some of that dust off there. Now, on this album, Night After Night, which came out in 1989, he got back to more of a electronic kind of fusion sound with this album. There's a great song on here called Fusion, which I love, spelled with 2 Z's. Now, this album features a song called Children of the Ghetto, and I think that it's probably his best album for Elektra. Thief in the Night and George Duke from '86 being his other two. Now, this is Snapshot from 1992. Very much like the previous album, and he actually had a big hit on this album called Rhyme, No Reason. Is the back of that album. Not a bad record, Night After Night. Illusions. Now, in this album, George Duke basically started to get kind of back to where he started from, this keyboard-oriented, chill funk. He did a song on here called Buffalo Soldiers, which is a great message song. Another album's pretty underrated. I've come to like it. Now, this album, released in 1997, there's the back, features the title song, which is an amazingly slamming, example of funk. Now, this album, otherwise, somewhat similar to Illusions, but very good album, actually. I think it's, again, pretty underrated. After Hours. Now, this is George Duke's Chill album from 1998. I could mention tracks of this all day, but this is one of those through and through good albums. You put it on and just, kind of, you can kind of bliss out on that one as far as I'm concerned. Now, his next album is called Cool, which I don't actually have. I don't actually have Cool, but I do have this, Face the Music, from 2003. Now, this album is by far one of the funkiest things he ever did. His first on his own label, BPM. This is Duke from 2005. There's a song on here called Hybrids. Sounds like a Miles Davis funk jam kind of song. But this version, you see here, comes with a snippet from George Duke's Live in Japan DVD, which I'll be getting to in a few minutes. But anyway, here's Dookie Treats, a tremendously funky album from 2008. Go on talking about how wonderful this one is. I love George's expressions. Reminds me of George Clinton. Deja Vu, it's a good album, but not one of his, greatest, I suppose. But it's a good kind of jazz record. Anyway, here is Dreamweaver, his latest album. Came out last month, or a month before, actually. Now, this album is one of the greatest things I've ever heard him do. And I'm not just saying that as a cliche. This is one of the best albums he's ever done. You need to have this. And last but not least, I got something really, really interesting to show you here. If I can find it. Hold on a moment. The George Duke Band, live in Japan in 1983. Now, this is a very special DVD. It's out of print now, but this has George Duke performing on his clavitar during his Japanese tour for the Guardian of the Light album, and he's actually has this Japanese guy dancing around singing Shine On. But this is a fantastic album. R.I.P. George Duke.